dial is not in service at this time.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The show is about to begin.
Good afternoon, South Africalings. I hope all of you are keeping well and strong and healthy, and yeah, like I always say, all those good things, Let's keep it good and keep it real. This is the Wayne G Show, and this is Real Talk Radio, where the talk is always real. Oh yes, guys. Today, we're going to be talking about a very interesting subject. Well, I find it extremely interesting because, you know, it's one of those things that just won't die. It's like a cockroach, you know. You can hit it 1,000 times and that thing still runs away from under your shoe. Yes, guys. Today we're going to discuss socialism. Yes, that ideology that keeps penetrating our generations over and over again. And, you know, even though it has experienced systematic, disastrous failures in application across the world, it is still current and it is still extremely popular. You know, you won't believe how popular it is at the moment, or maybe you will because of your exposure to, you know, social media and what's going on in the first world. But there's a massive drive towards socialism, or perhaps let me rather say the ideal of socialism, you know, where you've got little first world millennials, especially the millennials. For some reason, millennials have really cottoned onto socialism. And, you know, maybe it can be attributed to the 2008 economic collapse in America, where their parents lost their houses and businesses and properties, and, you know, a lot of it was blamed on the corporate system, on capitalism. And, you know, perhaps this movement is more anti-capitalism than it is socialism, because, yeah, you don't see anybody in the third world demonstrating and demanding socialist ideologies and socialist regimes to come into place, because a lot of them are dominated by socialist regimes and they are severely oppressed, And that's the problem, guys. You've got places like Cuba, Venezuela, you know, where socialism is the form of government and it is just not working. People are really oppressed and not able to function in a system like that. You know, it is rather unfortunate that something that looks so good on paper, so good, it's like a utopian ideology. You know, what could be better than, you know, everybody living and working together on the land and sharing everything? You know, it reminds me of that John Lennon song, Imagine. You know, imagine all the people living life in peace and, you know, nothing to live or die for and no religion too, etc., etc. You know, it sounds a lot like socialism, and I guess at heart John Lennon perhaps was a socialist. You know, I think that especially towards his final years, I think the ideology caught on, and like I was saying, it is extremely attractive. You know, it's a utopian belief system where you are, you know, living in a society where there's no control. Perhaps to better understand socialism, you know, maybe I should just describe what socialism is. You know, socialism is an ideology that stemmed from Marxism. You know, it is complete ownership of all the means of production. You know, the money, the equipment, the land, everything is owned by the state or by the people. And, you know, the means of production is what is used to produce the living for the people. And, you know, it relies heavily on empathy, which is perhaps why it is also very attractive to the youth. You know, it's about everybody contributing and nobody suffering, and no class distinction and no private ownership where, you know, everything gets skewed. You know, you've got private ownership and all of a sudden there's people that are extremely poor and there's people that are extremely rich. And I think a lot of the socialist ideologies of the current times, in other words, it's called democratic socialism, where you elect a socialist government. It's not something that's totalitarian and dictated to, you know, like other socialist ideologies. And I think that's where people think it can work. You know, even George Orwell was a democratic socialist. You know, he really was. And if you look at socialism in its entirety, you know, its popularity, like I was saying, stems from compassion. But what happens with that, unfortunately, is you try and institute or initiate a socialist system and it gets exploited. Because unfortunately, a lot of humans are not compassionate. Many humans are extremely greedy, and what happens is you get dictators or extremely, controlling individuals, greedy individuals that exploit that system, because when the state owns the properties and the land, the state gets very rich while the population stay poor. And a great example of it was Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was a capitalist. Reaganomics, or how his system worked in America, was absolutely brilliant. He was the first to talk about make America great again. And he always gives a story about socialism, where in the previous Soviet Union, or the United Soviet Union, the USSR, if you wanted a car, there was a 10-year waiting list, and you had to go through numerous channels and applications to get a car. So you had to go through this forum, through that forum, through this socialist government, through that socialist policy, through that designer, through that builder, etc., to get a car. And it took about 10 years to get a car. And he always makes a joke about old Mikhail, who wanted to go and get a car, and they tell him, yes, the waiting list is 10 years. So he says to them, okay, will that be in the morning or the afternoon? So the government producers of the vehicles were like, why does it matter? It's 10 years from now. So he says, yes, it does matter, because the plumber is coming in the morning. And that is absolutely brilliant. It sums it up completely. And that's a problem with socialism as well. If the means of production is totally controlled by the state, there's no need for competition. There's no need for competition, or the need to try and develop a competitive system, and a system that is engineered or geared towards profit. And with profit comes competition, and with competition comes innovation, and all those kinds of systems is what produces and makes capitalism so successful. And a lot of those first world millennials that are preaching socialism, I don't think even understand what it is. And if you had to pick them up and drop them in a socialist state, I think they'd get a big fright and run away. But it's very, very easy to want free healthcare, free education, no student loans. And like they always say, or the joke is, a socialist wants everything that you've got except your job. And that's it. It's a slacker mentality. And like Maggie Thatcher said, she said such a true thing about socialism. Eventually you run out of other people's money, and that's a problem, guys. You pick the carcass until it's clean, and that's why it doesn't work. Because fortunately or unfortunately, humans A, are productive creatures, and B, humans live in a hierarchy. We are hierarchical creatures, so we are naturally prone to try and structure a certain kind of hierarchy, whether it is in business, whether it is in a social position. There's certain hierarchies, and that's natural, that's genetic, that's our biology, our evolution. So as nice as socialism sounds and as great it is on paper, it's not part of our biology. It's not part of our evolution. George Orwell did it best. And again, George Orwell, believe it or not, like I said earlier, is a socialist, or was a socialist. And he wrote Animal Farm about socialism. And it looked like a massive failure in the book, where the animals decided to overrun the farmer and take control of the farm and run it productively, that everyone gets an equitable share of the farm, and no more exploitation. And what happened? The pigs, who were the most intelligent, ended up exploiting all the other animals. And that's where George Orwell tried to make the distinction between socialism and democratic socialism. And he believed that if people were more empathetic and not like old Napoleon and his brother, the pigs, in Animal Farm, that you could actually make it work. You could actually make socialism work if everybody contributed and everybody showed empathy towards their fellow man, which is a beautiful story. Again, it is a wonderful idea. Imagine you could live in a utopia like that if everyone contributed, but they don't. There's greed, and there's nepotism and cronyism and all those things that infiltrate the system. So yes, as beautiful as socialism is on paper, unfortunately, it cannot survive and it cannot thrive in our lives, because what does it do? It destroys the market. It destroys the very system that it needs to survive on. And that cannot work. And that's why it does not work. And, you know, you look at South Africa for an example. They again think a socialist country is going to work, where the government owns all the land. But look at the disasters that are happening here. The government owns all the parastatals and they're all bankrupt. And that's what happens, guys. That's what happens in socialism. Everything goes to shit. And eventually you're left with nothing except for a few very wealthy dictators at the expense of the rest of us. And that's why it fails, guys, and it will never ever succeed. That's my thoughts. Again, that's my opinion. I hope it made some sense to you, and I hope that it gave a better understanding to you of what socialism actually is and why it does not work. Yes, capitalism is flawed. Yes, capitalism creates huge inequality, but I think of all the systems, it works the best. And it is the most productive. That's my opinion again, guys. Peace and love.